Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, who joins us, and I appreciate him spending time with us, syndicated columnist, former head of Policy Department of the Treasury, father of Reaganomics, a top economist. You can also go to his website. We'll put that URL up on screen for everyone as well, where you can read his articles. He also allows us to resyndicate them at INFOWARS.com. I wanted to get him on to really break this down, because Mark Faber and Ron Paul and all these other experts, here's the headlines. Experts, Fed's QE Unlimited will lead to total collapse. That's a quote. Ron Paul came out on Fox and said Bernanke admits economy's, quote, in bad shape. That's a quote. Fed announcement may mean beginning of end of QE3. Then they said, well, no, it's not. This is very technical stuff, but most of the experts that have been right in the past say this spells a major correction middle of next year. I try to study this and don't understand it all. So that's why we bring in people like Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. We'll look at this briefly. Then we'll look at the geopolitical and get an update on what he thinks is happening there. But, Doc, thanks for coming on with us.
Please do, Alex.
Well, you just heard my question there. What's happening? Why is there all this concern over the QE Unlimited?
That's a good question. There shouldn't be. The Fed has made it clear it's not going to stop printing money to buy the bonds until its benchmarks are met, and those are specified in terms of the unemployment rate and the real GDP growth rate, and the economy is nowhere near either. So, and it's not going to be. So QE will continue. I have no idea why the big banks like Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, why they put out all this propaganda about tapering. Bernanke has made it very clear he's not going to do anything like that until he has a firm recovery. But he can't stop, because the entire financial system now is rigged based on the bond purchases by the Fed. So if they stop purchasing the bonds, the prices will fall, the interest rates will go up, the bond market will collapse, the stock market will collapse, the balance sheets of the big banks, too big to fail, will turn insolvent again, and the whole system will come down. So we can't stop, because in the short run, the immediate effect would be disaster. The long-run effect, of course, will also be disaster, because eventually printing all of these new dollars will scare the rest of the world away from the dollar. And as they leave the dollar, the exchange value of the dollar will collapse, and then the Fed will lose control. So they're going to lose control. If they stop QE, they'll lose control in the short run. If they continue QE, they will lose control later on.
I don't remember in recent memory having the Obama administration and the media saying we're going to begin tapering, and then you have the Fed coming out and saying we're not going to in the same day, and we see Obama conflicting with Kerry on Syria statements. This looks like a bunch of different special interests fighting with each other. Is that accurate?
I don't really know. It's not up to Obama what the Fed does. And the Fed's made it clear that it's going to save the big banks. So I think what the outcome will be, the Fed puts off the collapse of the big banks for a while, but the cost of that is everyone's collapse. The banks and everyone else's. Only it comes later. Now, about Syria, I don't really think that the Israel lobby has given up on the war. I don't think the neoconservatives have given up. They have a strategic agent inside the Obama regime, Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor. I don't think the neocon agent at the UN, Samantha Powers, or whatever her name is, they haven't given up on their war. They don't quite know what to do, because everything was going in order until Putin and the British Parliament blocked them on Syria. I don't know how they'll get around it, but they certainly don't want Iran left there. They don't want Hezbollah there in Lebanon. And so they're probably trying to figure out how can we get this going again. I don't know if they can risk another false flag operation because there's so much skepticism of them now. Clearly, their lies don't go down as well or as easily with the rest of the world. But I don't think they've given up. So I see this as a temporary defeat for the neoconservatives and for the Israel lobby. But they'll find some way, or they'll certainly attempt to find some way to continue the wars and turmoil in the Middle East.
Now, sir, I want to get specifically into what we're seeing happen here with Putin and then back into what you were just discussing with Syria and Iran. But I don't romanticize Vladimir Putin, but I do look at his policies, trying to get their economy going, trying to cut taxes on poor people, trying to pay people to get married and have kids. He put out an op-ed in the Interfax news agency that is being criticized, where he said we need family values, we need basic religion like Christianity, we need to not attack families, and our country's so evil now that our media is criticizing him for saying we don't need to be degenerate. And I'm really wondering, because you have a lot of contacts internationally, I know, who Vladimir Putin really is and how you think they'll respond to an attack on Iran, because as you know, Lindsey Graham has got a resolution to just give Obama strike power. He said you don't need it, but here, I want to give it to you. And Israel is saying no time left for negotiations, says their minister. Just really a push to start war. And then I'm wondering, well, first the Putin question, and then, is Israel and NATO and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, why they're so reckless?
Well, Israel has its own interests and uses Washington. And then Washington uses its puppets like Turkey and NATO. Look, the Russians went through many decades of tyranny, and police state, and sort of a very hard attitude of government toward the people, and they've learned a lesson. They've redeemed themselves. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, because of the various chaos and the advice they were given by Americans, a lot of outside money managed to grab most of the resources. And they were bleeding Russia dry, just like they bleed Americans dry. And Putin got in and more or less stopped that and reduced it. And
so is he a good dictator? I mean,
he's not a dictator.
I know he's been elected 3 times, and he's saying a 4th may run, but then they argue those elections are fixed. But I mean, is he the good strong man then?
He's an elected official with massive support. And whatever the Western media says is just a lie. What do they tell the truth about? Nothing. So why would you believe what they say about Putin?
Sure. I was being devil's advocate. I know he's not a dictator. So what do you, I mean, you've gotten international awards. You travel all over the world. What is your intel on Putin then? I mean, is he really in control, and what is his goal? Because he does try to do a lot of good things for Russians.
Precisely. That's what his job is. And he's trying to put a country back together that was destroyed, and he's succeeding. His main problem is the hundreds of non-governmental organizations inside Russia that pretend to be human rights groups, and they're American agents. They're funded by Washington, and Washington funds the so-called political opposition to Putin. So his main problem is the American interference, Washington interference in internal Soviet politics. And his other problem is the radicalization of the Muslims in the Middle East by the United States and Israel. And the reason Washington does this is they hope to spread the radicalization and the strife into Russia and into China.
That's what I was about to say. The Russian media reported that Bandar Bush, the Saudi prince, nicknamed Bandar Bush, Prince Bandar Sultan, threatened to use al-Qaeda against Russia if they don't back off. I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah. Well, we've already done that to them, you know, the Chechens. And we support the Chechens. I don't mean you and I, but I mean Washington.
Sure, yeah.
And so if you are determined to have world hegemony, remember now, this is the driving force of American foreign policy in the 21st century, is the neoconservative ideology of U.S. world hegemony. You can't invade China or Russia. So you have to destabilize them. And so we have a two-pronged attack. One is we have all of these Washington-funded NGOs pretending to be human rights organizations. And then we hope to spread more and more Muslim strife into the Muslim populations of China and India. And then we use the Washington-funded NGOs in those countries to denounce the governments for opposing the freedom fighters.
And then the government arrests them as foreign agents, and our media says they're arresting them for protesting.
That's exactly right. And so that's the American plan. And Putin is, I think, aware of that, and he's beginning to react to it and to stand up to it. I think the Chinese have been very careless in their relations with Washington. Maybe they were more centered on American markets and putting up with other things to
sure,
but they too will learn. And then what if this policy from the United States continues to be aggressive? It'll lead to nuclear war.
PaulCraigRoberts.org is where people can read your daily and weekly columns. It's simply amazing. The site looks great as well, very easy to use. We're going to do one more segment with you, Doc, then let you go by the end of the hour and come back and take calls. I want to ask you specifically, back on the economy, what you think is going to happen to it then in a time frame with QE Unlimited.
The Alex Jones channel is the official page of the InfoWar. But don't miss what's happening on our other channels. The Info Warrior, with the week's best videos. Prison Planet Live, where Paul Joseph Watson gives his expert analysis. And keep up with the rest of the InfoWars crew on our other pages. All of our videos are available to repost for educational purposes. See the sidebar of the Alex Jones channel for the subscription links. And remember, you can always find our videos in the highest quality by becoming a member of PrisonPlanet.tv.
All right, final segment with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, PaulCraigRoberts.org. I'm Alex Jones with InfoWars.com. You can follow us on Twitter at RealAlexJones. Important to do that for emergency news alerts and more. That's Real Alex Jones on Twitter. Also our Facebook. You can find that at PrisonPlanet.com. Links over to that. And then, of course, there's the nightly news, 7 o'clock weeknights. A big show tonight. InfoWars Nightly News, 7 o'clock Central. Dr. Roberts, I was talking to you during the break, quantifying this. You were telling me you agree with Faber, Ron Paul, and others that next year looks bad, but that it doesn't matter either way with QE. So I know you don't like to put dates on it, but I remember about 3-4 years ago, you were on the show saying, I would guess 3 or 4 years till it really collapses. It takes longer for these things, but 3 or 4 years. So he's accurately been predicting a lot of stuff, and I just want to find out if I really need to be that worried. And if you need to be that worried, because we know the economy's slowly rotting and things are deindustrializing, it's terrible, and they're shutting down our power plants and all the rest of it. But I want to know from Roberts, because he said during the break, he said, no, I think next year is going to be bad. I want to find out specifically what he has to say. Okay, it's connecting right now, and we'll get him to answer that question. But what he said during the break was, he said, no. He said, it's bad next year. And he said, we're getting to that point. And I'm sure he'll write an article about that. We can email him and ask him to write us an article about that specifically on that subject, because there's a lot of speculation. What a cliffhanger that we just had. He goes, Alex, you're gone. So we're no longer in contact with him.
Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free. Check it out at infowars.com/show.